What is up guys, and in this video I will be doing and showing you how you do a low light test, and I decided to bring back my good old trusty Nikon D5200. As you can see here, I'm going to show you how you actually do a proper low light test, whether or not you can decide is that camera worth it for me, and I'm going to show you in this video. Like I said, with this camera, stay tuned. So when it comes to shooting, especially video, photos not so much. If you guys want me to make a low light photography test and show you guys how to do it, give this video a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. But for this specific video, I will be showing you guys exactly how you do a low light video test. So you're probably on the market for a camera, or you want to test can any Nikon shoot in low light. So rule or tip number one when it comes to seeing what a camera is capable of is, first thing what you want to do is you want to make sure all your settings are in manual, right? Doesn't matter what camera you have, making sure it is in full manual, and you want to go into the menu settings. And if you want to have me show you guys exactly how you do that, I have other videos, link in the description, that not necessarily a trick, but what camera companies do is if you have an entry-level DSLR or mirrorless camera, straight out of the box, everything is on auto. And if you bring this camera into low light, you're like, oh wow, this camera actually does really great in low light capabilities. And I was actually with a client buying her first camera, and she brings the camera into the low light, and you're like, wow, this low light is actually doing really well. But the truth behind that is that the camera itself was on all auto settings, hence you'll have your shutter speed change, you have your aperture change, your ISO sensitivity will automatically go up to compensate for the low light. But if you want to really push a camera's capability, you want to have your camera, like I said, tip number one is making sure your camera is in full manual settings. So having your settings at ISO 100, your shutter speed at 1/50, because that is the correct shutter speed if you're filming in 24 frames per second, and having your aperture. And for this video and this test, I'll be using the kit lens right here, 18 to 55 kit lens. And it's the whole point of having the kit setup is to be able to have some sort of baseline, because if you want to be able to shoot low light, it's kind of unfair if you have let's say a 5000 super fast glass on that shooting at 1.4, 1.2, 0.98. You're not really seeing the capabilities of the actual body itself, and I'll talk about that a little later. So like I said, make sure your camera is on everything manual, especially manual ISO, not auto ISO. Tip number two when it comes to doing a low light test is getting rid of any sort of light sources. And right now I'm going to be able to turn off my ring light right here and my ceiling light, aka my hair light. And I'll also, in same tip, like tip number one, making sure I put my ISO to manual. So I'm going to do that right now, because if you don't put your camera to manual settings, the auto ISO is going to turn on the light or make you think that, oh, it's actually doing pretty well in low light. But because I have my auto ISO settings on, it's gonna adjust. So I'm gonna turn off my hair light. Now it's gonna be complete darkness, right? All I have is my phone light, and you're starting to see the grain of low light. And the whole point of shooting videos in a low light setting is because it actually strips away everything that the camera is capable of, and it's going to show you what the camera is actually capable of. Because when it comes to low light, as creepy as this is, usually cameras have issues like autofocus, you'll see graininess in the video, and you'll be able to see whether or not your camera is of decent quality. So now I pretty much have my camera at 100 ISO, and I just have a ring light to the side of me. It is now on manual ISO, so the ISO does not increase, everything is on manual. And to perform a low light test, what you want to be able to do is slowly bump up the ISO and seeing if there's grain in the video. Is the video itself still usable? And how is the autofocus in low light? That is essentially the three trinity of how you actually do a low light video test. I'm going to show you guys right now on this Z50 how it does. Right now it's on ISO 100. Now I'm shooting on ISO 250. So you want to slowly increase your ISO settings and essentially in a full stop of light. You don't want to go from 100 to 125 because that's not going to be a big difference. You want to be able to do bigger jumps. So 100 ISO to 300 to 600 to 900 to 1200 to 1000. Now I am shooting at ISO 800, and one of the best tests for low light is if you just turn off your camera completely and see how far you can crank the ISO to actually see the quality of your video. So right now guys, I am at ISO 12,560. You don't ever want to shoot this high of an ISO and you want to have some sort of lighting, but in this room I'm pretty much completely, it's black in here with this a little bit of curtain light, but as you can see, a lot of grain, and it's kind of expected coming out of a crop body camera. But now that you know the three tests of when it comes to how you actually do low light video tests, I'm gonna take out my Nikon D5200 out in the real world, in the dark, and at nighttime with a kit lens and show you guys what it's capable of. And like I said, if you watch part 2, I'm gonna take this camera right here in the next part, in the next video, and take that guy out for a low light video test. So if you want to see that video, hit that thumbs up button and let's get out of here. It is freezing. Things I do for YouTube. So right now I am in traffic. So obviously in a realistic situation, you wouldn't be shooting in like pitch black. But my current settings are 1/50, 3.5, and 100 ISO. So the trick to seeing how the ISO actually performs is you want to see it at its lowest, and then you want to slowly bump up the ISO. So right now I'm at 100 ISO. Now I'm at 320 ISO. This is at 800 ISO. This is at 1250 ISO. And as you can see, it's actually not that bad at 1250 ISO if you keep it at 1/50. 3.5, it would of course look a lot better if I had like a 1.8 glass, but for 1250 ISO, it's not bad at all. This is at 1600 ISO, bumped it up to 2500, 4000, 5000 ISO, 6400, high 0.3. I never used the high. The highest this would go would be 6400. And now I'm filming at ISO 6400. And this is the night footage of me using the Nikon D5200. A lot of ambient light as you see here by the streets. But now as I walk here, as it's literally like pitch black, no street lights. Once in post, you should be able to start seeing some grain in the footage. And especially because this is a kit lens, if I zoom in, you're gonna be losing even more light. But if you're looking at just like normal light photography, I think in low light you are actually not that bad when it comes to shooting on a crop. Even though it's 24.2, there's actually more megapixels in this compared to my Z50, and I'm actually put in some bonus snaps for you guys to see what this camera is actually capable of. Right now I'm at 1/50, 3.5, 1000 ISO. Right now, the autofocus can't even detect my face. So that's what you get in terms of crop body D5200 and autofocus. So stay tuned, guys. That was my Nikon D5200 low light test. Stay tuned for part 2, where I actually take out my Z50, if you're Canadian, to see how that does in low light autofocus capabilities, and is it grainy or does it actually do worse than this camera? Stay tuned. And that, guys, that was my low light video test. I show you guys how you actually do a low light video test, what are the best settings to actually see what your camera is capable of, and little hacks. If you want better low light capabilities, of course, get yourself a fast lens. So whether that's a 1.8 or a 2.8, anything better up from the kit lens, that will help you get a little bit more light. And of course, if you want more low light capabilities, you want to look into more full frame sensors instead of crop body sensors. So essentially, you can film more in low light situations. Like the A7S II is known notoriously for shooting at, let's say, 1000 plus ISO and the video looking fine in comparison to a crop body. And that was my test. Stay tuned for part 2 if you want to see how the Z50 does in low light. But that was the Nikon D5200 in low light, and it's kind of expected, the results, but it's not completely that bad in low light. My name is Peter. You're watching a Broke Visionary Collective. Make sure you grab my free camera guide to help you buying your first camera. I also have a course on how you go from beginner to complete expert when it comes to how to use a camera, even if you've never used a camera before. Links in the description. Check that out. Help me help you. And we all start with nothing, but you can always create something. Cheers, guys.